So, finding a franchise, this is a hot topic, right? Because most people, what they're going to do is they're going to go to Google, they're going to search hottest franchises of 2023 or the next hot franchise brand, and they're going to get stuck with these ads for Dunkin' Donuts and Jimmy John's and all these brands that honestly have no availability. They're expensive to get into, and they're just not a good investment. The money is in the emerging brands. So let's talk about that for a little bit. So emerging brands. So Mike, kind of lead us into that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, Googling the best anything, you're getting someone else's opinion.
Yep.
Right? So the best investment for one person is not the best one for you. So don't go off of Google on how you buy franchises, right? Get with an advisor, work through what works for you. But, emerging brands, if you're not familiar with the term, emerging brands are things that are up and coming and you might not know yet, right? They're the next Jimmy John. They're the next whatever. And we get early access to a lot of those things, right? We saw brands that were at 2 locations now are at 400 locations, and it's hard to get into. Yep. So, a big one for us is, industries that have been around forever, but are getting big now, are getting into franchising, right? So water restoration, there's the Servpros of the world that are sold out, huge. You can only get resales in those things or the failing ones, and nobody else in the system wants them. That's why they're on the market for the outside investors, right? Or you can get into something like an All Dry or a United Water that smaller, you get early access, you get prime territory, you get lower royalty rates, all that kind of stuff, and you can help shape that. And you're not paying the premium price to get into the leftover markets.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Geronda, let's talk about some of your favorites, right? So if I say franchise, there's a couple brands that automatically pop in my head. I think for a lot of people, what's one of those for you? Like the national ones are like a franchise.
Sure. I think Chick-fil-A.
Yep.
Get that a lot. Dunkin' Donuts.
Dunkin' Donuts.
Huge, right?
Yep. So what's some alternatives? Like, what would you say an alternative to Dunkin' Donuts?
Sure. So I think an alternative to Dunkin' Donuts, if you're really passionate about donuts, you've got to look at Donut Envy, right? So mobile franchise, you can sort of work when you want. So many options there where you don't have to make such a huge investment, right? Nobody wants to spend $1 million on a business if you don't have to, if there are some other alternatives. So I think you should definitely take a look at Donut Envy.
Yeah, that's a great example. I mean, you're talking $1 million plus, actually probably more like $1.5 million now a donut with Dunkin', and then you can go into like a Donut Envy for $200K. Mobile, sure. I mean, highly profitable, 80% margins, like really fantastic numbers there. So let's talk about some other alternatives here. Let's play the whole this and that game, right?
Let's do it.
Yeah. So if I say Servpro, go, Mike.
Yeah. Again, All Dry, United Water. A lot of these that it's the same model, just a different take, right? Same industry, but simpler, right? They've seen what the big guys have done. They've seen the opportunity. And they said, hey, can we carve off this little piece, get in simpler, less restrictions, more territory availability, and really piggyback off of that. There's a lot of opportunity out there. It can't be held just by one company.
Good.
Very good.
Roto-Rooter.
I'm thinking Zoom Drain.
Zoom Drain. It's a good one. That's an alternative. That's fantastic. Zoom Drain, if you're not familiar with Zoom Drain, that's a younger company, fantastic organization, great leaders. They're doing some big things here. Let's see, what else? What are some other ones? Like Orangetheory. Give me one for that one, buddy.
Yeah. If you're in Orangetheory, it's usually because you have a passion for fitness or, bettering people's lives. I love ones that are either smaller, right? So you can get an alloy, something like that, where you're handling 100, 120 clients that stay years versus the turnover of these big box gyms. Yep. But what I think the real secret is going to these kids things that you don't have an overhead. You don't have a ton of trainers. You don't have the liability. You don't have the equipment expense. You don't have all this build out and all this kind of stuff. You can do a Soccer Stars, a Kiddo Kinetic, something like that, where you can still better lives, but earlier in the process, teach them better habits, and start that foundation earlier for a lot less overhead, a lot less operational complexity, and honestly, I think a better return.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's go back to why people think they want a brand. Like this is at the core of this, you Google search or whatever, or you're a customer, or you go on vacation. We hear this a lot too. They go on vacation, they're in some different part of the country. They see this concept and there's a line out the door and people are like, instant winner, the next big thing. It doesn't mean it's profitable or it's a good option like Chick-fil-A, right? Like, let's talk more on Chick-fil-A. You mentioned this earlier. So it's kind of a joke in the franchise world. Chick-fil-A is not a great opportunity, right? So talk more on that.
Well, be careful because Chick-fil-A has a very cult-like following, right? There are people who truly believe in Chick-fil-A.
They're gonna be angry.
But the thing about it is it's perception, right? It's what people perceive as being a great business. They look at Chick-fil-A and think highly successful. You get the opportunity to be off on Sundays, so who wouldn't want that? But really, when it boils down to it, the perception that Chick-fil-A is this big, massive brand that you can easily get into is probably a little bit of a misconception, right? So one of the things that you need to understand is that in order to get into a Chick-fil-A, you are signing up to essentially work for a Chick-fil-A. So you're an owner operator, but there's not a ton of profit sharing there. There's no real exit strategy that's built out for you. And it's not the kind of business that you think it is just on the outside looking in. So if you want to sign up to work for a company, then yeah, Chick-fil-A may be an option that you want to consider, but it's not a true franchise model.
You're gonna be busy if that's what you're going for. But
Sure.
Being busy is not a good investment a lot, right? We want a good investment. Same thing with other brands. You go to these fitness concepts that are just packed out the door. People get excited about it. Kind of a fad, they go away. It doesn't mean it's a good investment. So Mike, talk more about that.
Yeah, well, I think it's all perception, like you said. You see these models, right? So you assume, well, they are on Main and Main. They got a huge location. I hear them on the radio. They must be killing it. Look at all those things. And we had some businesses that revenue was high and our expenses were just as high to get that credibility. And then you think of the guy fixing your gutters and you're like, that dude probably makes minimum wage. And it used to be, mom and dad would go, you better go to college. You're going to be this guy. And then you look at their P&Ls, you're going, I'll take that every single day.
Yep.
That guy is making a killing. Chick-fil-A is great. So is McDonald's and Popeyes and all these other things, which are your competitors, versus you are the only franchise in gutters going up against Chuck in a truck kind of thing, right? So just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not hugely profitable. And just because that guy, isn't rocking, Louis Vuitton's climbing up that ladder, his truck is 60 grand and he makes a ton of money.
Yeah, without a doubt. So let's just talk on that one more time. So the big question here is, how do you find these brands? Like, how do you find the emerging brands? Because I'll tell you right now, we work with thousands of clients. We work with so many people. A lot of big investors are coming in saying, find us boring businesses that are not going to go away in a recession. I don't want the fads. I don't want all this stuff. I just kind of keyed it in here, but how do you find these brands?
Yeah, a lot of it is find an expert,
Yep.
right? One of my mentors always says, as an investor, your job's not to learn the how, it's find the who to do the how, right? And that's your operator once you get into the business. That's also an advisor when you're trying to find a business, right? Just like you wouldn't go and find a property for real estate without getting an expert, getting a broker, getting a real estate agent that does that 24/7, right? Get an expert that does this every single day for thousands of people. Also, I don't want them to cut their teeth on my money. I want to know that they've done this before. At least their team's done it before. So working with people that do thousands upon thousands of reps, they're going to have experience and know what you're looking for.
Yeah, we get pitched hundreds of different brands and concepts all the time. We just sat through a presentation a little bit ago. We get to make that assessment. Do we want these brands or not based on the criteria we're looking for our clients? So yeah, find that expert advisor for sure. All right, so just to play off that, Toronto, what are a couple things that Sidekick or even you look for in a great emerging brand?
Sure. Great question. So I have a lot of friends and family over the years that have asked me to look at businesses for them. So they're kind of vetting out franchises, and similar to what we look for here at Sidekick is we want brands that have strong economics, right? A proven system, because you're buying into a franchise because they've got all the nuts and bolts sort of built in. In addition to that, strong validation, which I think is the sweet spot in terms of franchising. So existing franchisees who are validating that this is a good business, that they are doing well in that business, and also that they are happy in that business. And so I think those are the kind of things that when it checks all the boxes for you, I think that's what makes a good business. But in addition to that, it's got to feel right for you, right? Because what makes a good business for me may not necessarily be a good business for you. So it's got to feel right and good to you.
Yeah. You know, something I get a lot too is people are really worked up about the brand. And I think for a lot of years, that's what franchising was built on, was the brand. Because you're going down Main and Main, you're going to pull into the brand, you know. This is 2023. Like brand is not as important because you have access to all this other data. You've got the internet, this thing called the internet, you know, like social media. The brand itself is not as important as it used to. The marketing of that brand is, but not the brand itself, especially on the service side of things. So if you want to touch on that, Mike, at all, but like the brand side of it, I'm a marketing guy, and the brand part of it is just not as important as it used to be.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, for a customer, they're looking at who's going to do a good job, right? And now brand can be represented in different ways, right? You can't have a crappy website,
Right.
but those franchisors are going to have a stronger website than I could drum up in 15 minutes, right? But also it's reputation, right? You have a brand. It's not because you have the best logo. It's because you got a ton of Google reviews, and your franchisor knows how to capture that. And there's 700 other locations that have those reviews, right? So it's not necessarily knowing the brand. It's having the business model that can build a brand in your area.
Great. Fantastic.